Okay, everybody, we are live. This is the third session of the first day of the first Cosmic Conference. I'm Tala, and I'm a consultant here at Cosmic Centaurs. I'm also the host of this panel. So for those of you who tuned in earlier, Marilyn was leading those panels, but I'm lucky enough to be here and joined by some remarkable guests to talk about remote work and how it is a long-distance relationship with your job. So as you all know, the theme of this conference is centered around the future of work and specifically the impact of remote work in our post-pandemic world. Today's discussion is all about education and recruitment and how that has and will continue to change as a result of remote work and the pandemic. So this is especially true for students and young professionals. A lot of them are entering the workforce post-COVID-19, and they're going to need new skills for the remote experiences ahead of them. They'll likely start their first job without, doing the first day of work commute or without having a tour of the office. And so we're hoping that this session will shed light on the knowledge and skills that educators, employers, and recruiters are looking for in emerging talent and how you can thrive in what will be the workplace of the future. So before we dive in, just a couple of housekeeping and tech guidelines. If you're streaming, we're on Facebook and on LinkedIn, and please feel free to engage, give it a like or a clap. You can also ask questions to any of our panelists in the comments section, and we'll get to them towards the end of the Q&A. If you're on any other social channels and you want to keep up with the conversation, you can use the hashtag Cosmic Conference on Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, or anywhere else. So without further ado, we'll go ahead and get started. I'd love to introduce the incredible people who so kindly agreed to be panelists at this session. First up, we have Chrisyle. Chrisyle is an advisor for talent acquisition at Dell Technologies, covering the Middle East, Turkey, and Africa. She is a passionate talent acquisition professional, recruiting for all things tech and specializing in strategic sourcing and talent acquisition across different regions. Chrisyle is a strong believer and advocate of diversity and inclusion at the workplace, which is awesome because that's also what we believe in too. She's particularly focused on people, culture, and innovation. So thank you so much for joining us, Chrisyle. We're so happy to have you here.
Thank you, it's my pleasure.
Next up, we have someone who I actually have the personal pleasure of working with. Mohamed Abbouri is an advisor with the Misk Foundation in Saudi Arabia. As an advisor, he's worked on the foundation's leadership to set the strategic direction for the foundation, establish and grow its various subsidiaries in the fields of education, media, culture, and arts. Mohamed has about 20 years of business and management consulting experience across Europe and the Middle East, and he established and led the education practice for the Boston Consulting Group, BCG, working with governments and private sector entities on strategy, organization, human capital development, and large-scale transformation programs. So thank you also, Mohamed, for joining us. Very happy to have you.
Thank you so much. Pleasure being with you.
And awesome. And last but not least, we have Stella Mantechou, who is the Associate Director of INSEAD's Executive Career Development. Stella is an international talent and career development professional with over 15 years of experience. She's worked in higher education sectors, specializing in executive and career coaching, as well as training and curriculum design. Stella has an intrapreneurial nature, which I love, and a passion for sharing knowledge by connecting people. That led her to initiate and curate a regional think tank called the Middle East Career Development Conference. It started in 2012 and ran for about 4 years, and it brought together thought leaders across youth development and career counseling to support talent growth in the region. So Stella, thank you as well for joining us today.
Thank you, the pleasure is all mine.
Awesome. So we're not here to hear from me. We really want to hear from all of you. And as some of you who may have tuned in earlier, you might be a little bit familiar with the format. We have some general questions, and then we're going to dive into some specifics. So I'll start with a thought-provoking general question for everyone. There's a global statistic that says 47% of university students are thinking about deferring university access this year. So my question to you, and maybe Stella, we can start with you, is it still relevant to go to university in 2020?
Thank you. I think the question should not be if it's relevant to go to university, but whether the new university experience will be relevant to the students and their needs. Personally, I think that gaining knowledge in whatever form will always be relevant, and I believe that in a very competitive market landscape, a degree will always open new doors, particularly in more traditional markets. However, we can't ignore movements such as self-directed learning, entrepreneurial gap years. I don't know if you guys have heard of uncollege.org that encourages stepping out of the classroom to gain real-life skills. But even those movements, Tala, promoting their core experiential learning, coaching and mentoring, job shadowing, and content customization. So in my opinion, these are the elements that the education of the future should bring in its core too. Whether we like it or not, there will be less campus time and more digital and virtual time, right? The university experience will and has to become a tailored one, where each student works out what parts of a degree offering appeal to them. And to sum up, universities will need to adjust to what makes them relevant to a student, where the student can decide what elements of a curriculum suit them to achieve their personal goals.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. Learning takes place both inside and outside the classroom. And I'm actually curious, Mohamed, as somebody who works in education, what would your answer be to that question?
I would say I mostly agree with Stella. I think but I would say, like, I will take a little bit more of a traditionalist view here. I think it depends really around the region where you are and let's say, and what you want to do. I think if you look here in the Middle East, I think the degree is still pretty much important. And I think just if you look historically, I think the requirement and appreciation for the degree is greater than for the skill. And I think that's as well historically grown, as I think in the past, if you wanted to work for government, as long as you had kind of a degree, then the job was pretty much kind of guaranteed. So that's one. The other thing, I think that there are some, let's say, professions, whether it's medicine or engineering, where you really need that study, as you need that academic kind of background. So yeah, my advice would still kind of be, if you want to work in the region here, pretty much the degree is important. Just to give you an example, I had two examples. I had one of my first projects I did in Dubai was with a bank in Dubai, and I had one that was a program manager, and he was probably one of the best I had worked with, and we did amazing things. And then a few years later, the bank merged, and he lost his job, and he didn't have a degree, and he couldn't get another job purely because they were asking for his degree, yet he had the skills. I had another example where I was hiring, let's say, a CEO for an entity where he didn't have an MBA, and he was a CEO for 18 years. Yet the client was kind of asking him, like, how can you lead HR or finance if you haven't done an MBA? And I had like, well, he'd done it for the last 17 years. Why is the degree still important? So yeah, the degree is pretty much still important in this region, I would say.
Yeah, I mean, you made some great points. I'd have to agree. It's, experience and academia, how do they balance themselves out? Chrisyle, as a recruiter, maybe you, and a talent advisor, maybe you could share your point of view on this as well.
So, Tala, I'm going to take a little technological spin on this particular question, in the sense that along with the rest of the industries, a number of universities also had to go through this whole digital transformation process, where they had to move from classroom learning to distance learning and online learning. Being a student and being part of that entire journey adds so much value to the student. I mean, as a student, you can look at it from the outside, and the modern education system that is digitally transformed, it's moving into, a distance and online learning landscape. But being a student and being part of that, you will gain so much knowledge as to how that process went through. I think it's quite heroic for the students in this particular time frame to be part of universities who have taken this digital transformation journey. And the second thing would be, they would be prepared for the digitally transformed environment that that they'll be joining once they leave the university. So all the organizations, are digitally transformed, they're digitally enabled. And as students in this particular year, they'll be able to say that I went through that process because I was in the midst of that entire process. So I think it's still definitely a good time to join university and be part of that entire digital transformation journey from the education landscape.
That's an excellent point. And you touched on a couple of things that I'm itching to get to a little later on. But I guess, Chrisyle, while I have you, maybe you could tell us a little bit about what you think recruiters will be looking for post-COVID-19. Are there any trends you have seen, maybe digital transformation or otherwise, that you think have emerged as a result of the pandemic and the increase in remote work?
So it's a great question, Tala. In terms of looking at the trends, I think the biggest trend that we've seen so far and we will see for foreseeable future is the delinking of talent from place. So no longer is talent located to a particular workplace. We have a huge talent pool or wider talent pool that is present across the globe. I mean, individuals are no longer stuck to a particular workplace because we are remotely working or you're working from home. So we have a wider talent pool as organizations to look at this point in time, which fosters a thing which of course is close to my heart, is diversity and inclusion, because at this point in time, we have a more diverse workforce that we can look into because of the flexible ways of working. I think that is one of the biggest trends. And another big trend is we're seeing right now is a resilient workforce. I think that is a buzzword that everybody is tired of listening to, but is quite true, because we've come out with individuals who overnight had to decide that they had to work from home, they had to work with different grappling environments, the healthcare systems. So we've come out with a more resilient workforce that's ready to take on challenges at every turn in the workspace at this point in time. So those are the two areas I've seen as big trends within this particular situation.
And very poignant trends at that as well. I do agree with you, and I'd love to actually hear, Stella, if you also are seeing similar trends or something else as a result of the pandemic, and what emerging talent is looking to kind of, or showcasing rather, the skills that they have.
Definitely. And indeed, it's very important to look into mental toughness and how you bounce out of this situation, right? I also see that as companies move more into remote working contracts, one of the main concerns is maintaining high productivity. So candidates need to showcase self-motivation, strong organizational skills that will inevitably contribute in sustaining high productivity as a remote worker. There are several tools out there. We've seen people using Trello, Basecamp, etc. But I think you also need to have top-notch communication skills. So this is kind of twofold, right? It's not only in terms of being familiar with the most common tools that are used by recruiters or your employer, but also in terms of being able to build relationships remotely with your internal stakeholders and clients. And you should show in a way that you should not always rely on technology to build relationships. So don't forget the importance of meeting people over a video call, or remaining curious about them, their work. How do you work better together in this new virtual world? So I think communication in that content, not only in the essence of tools, but also in the sense of building relationships and trust, will be extremely important in this new sort of remote work.
That's a really valuable point. I think something that we often talk about at Cosmic Centaurs is how the tech stack is so useful and it's immensely helpful, but how we as humans and people manage that is even more important, right? So thank you for that. I wanted to ask Mohamed if you also have a glimpse into any recruitment trends that you might have seen, either through the programs that you support at Misk, or just some trends that you would have noticed within the industry.
No, I just wanted to respond to what Stella said and Chrisyle. I mean, what Chris said, I think, sorry, let me start with Stella. I think in terms of the skills, I mean, it's so much true. The self-motivation, the self-organization are really super important skills. The being tech savvy. I mean, having a lock on your door helps as well. If you have kids, that they don't show up. The other thing, which I think when it comes, I think you had a super good point around communication. And I wanted actually to use the word over communication, because you really kind of, people have no idea what you're doing. So you really need to over communicate in order. So that's one thing that I would kind of strongly encourage. And to be honest, I see this kind of as skills that are, a lot of them are needed in the day-to-day, let's say, workplace. I think only like the remote work just amplifies them. The thing where I think there will be a bit of a change is really around how organizations organize themselves. I think with the remote work, the way we organize, we delegate work, create more autonomous teams, autonomous decision-making, the role of the manager, etc. And I think that will quite accelerate. And I think concepts that have been written about in the past, like reinventing organizations or holacracy, I think they might come back and really become mainstream over the next couple of years. So those are things that I expect. I like very much what Chrisyle said around, like, I think we're delinking the, let's say the workforce from the place.
Yes, yeah, delinking the office space.
I would encourage the audience to make use of it. You don't have to apply for employers that are based where you are right now. Like, I mean, go for it. Apply for jobs in Silicon Valley. I think Twitter or Facebook, they want a global workforce. So, I mean, just go for it. I'm sure Dell is not only going to be employing people based out of, let's say, the office or the Middle East jurisdiction, but I'm sure there will be global jobs available for the people based out of the UAE as well, or the broader region. So I would strongly encourage everyone to make use of that.
Absolutely. I think, as Chrisyle mentioned, broadening that talent pool is one of the many benefits of remote work. And that does open quite a few doors for emerging talent and fresh graduates. Stella, through your work, have you seen any of that? Just out of curiosity, is that something that you've also noticed as with those who you coach and train and work on their skills?
Yes, absolutely. And I think we need to go to Mohamed's point and acknowledge the fact that remote work is here to stay. It's not only about digital nomads anymore. And what COVID has created was the environment where in recruitment we were forced to accelerate trends that were already existing. There was a report earlier by Zapier this year that revealed that about 74% of the workforce would prefer to quit a job, actually, for one that offers remote positions. And aside of being an employment perk, I think Mohamed mentioned it as well. You heard earlier this year, Twitter CEO Jack Dorsey announcing the company's permanent remote work policy, right, in May, which they later extended to all Square employees too. So that's one trend that will continue growing in 2020. And though companies are hiring less as a result of the pandemic, and this is very well known, remote work offers have nearly doubled in May compared to January 2020. Secondly, what we've seen, particularly at INSEAD, is that whole recruitment processes were fully shifted online, right? With all interviews happening online. I know of Google who have extended offers solely by seeing candidates virtually, while many companies are even now putting in place online onboarding processes for new employees. So that's definitely something that is changing, and we're seeing more and more of this. A little bit about different sectors that might be interesting to the audience, because everyone's talking about the impact of the pandemic and how there are less jobs in the market. I would encourage everyone to follow LinkedIn's chief economist, Karen Kimbrough. I apologize if I don't pronounce it right. She recently wrote that while we continue seeing hiring declines persisting in many places in the world globally, many of those hiring trend declines have started slowing down. And on the positive side, we've seen certain sectors looking for talent, supply chain, digital transformation professionals across the board, healthcare sector, online services, video conferencing, SaaS solutions, household products. There are sectors that are still showing healthy growth. And to wrap it up, overall job seekers must be prepared for longer periods of job search. That's true at any level of experience. We're definitely expecting a slowdown in global talent sourcing, with international assignments being less available in the market as there is uncertainty, right, in terms of traveling, immigration policies. But there are still opportunities in sectors that continue to show healthy growth.
Yeah, I think we might have lost Mohamed, but perhaps he'll be back. Stella, you made some remarkable points, and I really want to unpack those a bit further. I think one thing that you said really hit with me, which is this idea that the trends of recruitment, like it might slow down, but there's also the consideration of what that looks like internationally within your own market. I'd like to pivot just a little bit, although I'd love to explore that further, and ask a question a little bit related to innovation. So we all know that crises are a perfect moment for innovation. I'd like to ask if you think that this is a good time to teach emerging talent about entrepreneurship, and if through your work you've seen any examples of amazing young entrepreneurs or great programs that help to nurture young, great entrepreneurs. And I'd love to hear any stories if you have any. Mohamed, I'm not sure if that's something that you might have seen through Misk, or Stella through INSEAD, or Chrisyle through Dell.
Very good. Sorry, I had to switch off the camera for a second as my kids were at the door, but talking about having a lock on the door. So addressing your question, yeah, absolutely. I think it is absolutely the right time and the right place to think about, let's say, startups. I'm talking in particularly in the region. There is a huge hunger for startups. There is a huge appetite to fund startups. There is a huge need to grow the private sector. So I think, and in the absence of a job market, I think this is a great opportunity. At Misk, we've done many different, let's say, programs to promote entrepreneurship through the Entrepreneurship World Challenge, through partnerships with 500 startups to help incubate and accelerate startups. We've had, let's say, in the COVID, and then let's say an investor pitch round where we had about 1,000 people attending it online, of which 300 are investors, which shows you kind of that the digital model can far outpace a live model, because people don't have to fly into a city anymore. They can attend from any place, anywhere, and that's extremely powerful. So I think it's great. It's a great opportunity. I would really anyone that is, passionate about something, and I'm gonna borrow that word of resilience, because that kind of can go through hardships and is a fast learner, just to really consider this route of entrepreneurship. There are great places that would help you shape your thinking as well as the skills. I think the Y Combinator has a great startup school online. It's free for everyone. There is the Founder Institute. I think they have a very good program as well, I think even here in the region. And then you have, I would say, the startup studios, which provide more of shared services and infrastructure for founders, so that the founders only really have to be busy with growing their business rather than with things as legal, finance, or infrastructure, etc. So I would really encourage the youth to look at that avenue.
Absolutely. And as you can see, everyone's nodding in complete agreement with you. I know, Stella, you are an intrapreneur, so I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, and specifically to understand if there has been any cases of entrepreneurship that you would have seen through your work with INSEAD or otherwise, and if you could tell us a little bit about that.
Absolutely, and I'm glad you actually mentioned the entrepreneurship, right? I know Chrisyle might have some comments there as well. So we shouldn't look at entrepreneurship only as an opportunity to create something new, a new venture, but also as an opportunity to innovate inside a business, particularly in times where innovation is the critical factor to determine longevity of a business economically. So it's very important that we shouldn't forget about becoming entrepreneurs inside the businesses we work for. And if I take an example from INSEAD itself, that relates to the students mainly, because I think our audience is more related to how could I create that type of value. I'm not sure if you're aware that recently INSEAD has created an entrepreneurship competition, an innovation challenge to ask students to create business solutions to COVID problems. And we had around 120 MBA students with over 50 innovative ideas that participated in a virtual contest of it all. There was a prize for best venture, of course, that went to all about space. Very simple idea that suggests a membership service that aims to tackle the issue of inadequate home workspaces. Like Mohamed said, I had to switch off because my kids were at the background, right? So that venture idea plans to connect workers who lack of a quiet space to work with empty hotel rooms, and it solves in a way two problems. With the setup, you get staff that can be more productive in a space that they lack, and on the other hand, you got hotels who fill unoccupied space. And that was a simple student idea that could materialize into a very serious business model. There were many great ideas. I recall one was related to a platform that would allow to connect farmers with their customers directly. It was called Farm Fresh. So there is a lot of thinking around how do I innovate to solve problems post-pandemic that also have the social impact element, which is important. I'm sure there are more success stories out there, not only at INSEAD, in many universities. I heard NATO's 2020 Innovation Challenge was focused on the logistical and communication challenges posed by the pandemic. And many countries encourage young talent to come forward with those entrepreneurial ideas. So absolutely yes, go for it. Use the resources, university, network, panels like this, and get motivated and just do it.
That's awesome. I love your attitude as well. I think it's exactly the kind of inspiration that gets people to kind of get up and, realize that idea that they might have. So Chrisyle, it's a natural transition to speak to you about entrepreneurship. Is that something that you guys are doing at Dell Technologies, or are there any examples of it that you think are quite remarkable and you'd like to share a bit more about?
Yes, actually, I think that even when we were having the discussion before the panel started about Stella's mode of entrepreneurship, I think that is something that is quite interesting and an area that we at least look to explore and focus on. Inculcating entrepreneurs within an organization is very important, and it does not have to be major innovation. It can be as small as a change in a workflow process or automation of a particular daily task that is creating a backlog in particular workflow. So it doesn't have to be a major project that someone has to take on. It's small business ideas that cause huge business impact. And this is something that we promote on a regular basis. And we've seen cases across the region where individuals see the need and then they see the creativity and they add that together and they bring about that particular innovation. So I think entrepreneurship is something that is very interesting because you don't have to leave your job and start up. It is an amazing, and don't get me wrong, I'm not against entrepreneurship of any kind. I mean, it is amazing challenge and it's amazing for people to take that up, but you don't have to think of that as one track. You can look at entrepreneurship and growing that within the organization by taking up small projects that can cause huge, great impact to the business.
I actually couldn't agree more. I think that it's a great way to also remain engaged with your colleagues and your teams while working remotely too. So there's that aspect of it whereby you're still kind of all working on the same team towards something. I'm gonna stay on the track of innovation, and I actually have a question for Mohamed, because I know that through your work with the Misk Foundation, you've done a lot of research on the jobs of the future. And so I'd like to know what are some of these jobs and what are the ones we should keep an eye out for, the especially cool jobs of the future, and how can students and professionals alike upskill themselves for these jobs and to create these new ideas?
Very good. I think, let's say, we have to look at this question from two angles. One is kind of which sectors, and then two is kind of what kind of jobs. And Stella was already alluding to which sectors. I think in general, the software is eating in all the different sectors. So it's really around, I would say, the e-groceries, e-commerce, telemedicine, edtech, huge. Whether you talk about the deep tech, the fintech, all of that is growing and booming. So I would say really look into that space. Then I think when it comes to the job, both when we have looked at it at Misk, and I think also the colleagues at the World Economic Forum, I would say there are about three categories of kind of jobs. One, which is the no-brainer, which is the tech jobs, whether it's a programmer, a data scientist, cybersecurity specialist, or let's say the AI, the artificial intelligence, and the likes. I think the second one, which you have again in the digital space, which is around marketing, sales, content, it's extremely hard. I mean, and I'm involved in a couple of startups. It's extremely hard to find good people that understand digital marketing, that understand growth hacking, that are good in content development, and you know that yourself, Tala, and everything. It's very hard. And the third category, which is the thing what they call around the human interaction. That's not something that a machine or anyone kind of take over. And I think in the remote working world, it gets more and more important to really think around how do you build a culture and things like that. And I think the HR function and the jobs around that are going to be more and more important. So again, the three categories, which is around the tech, the marketing, sales, and content, and then I would say things related to human interactions, as in terms of where the jobs are. Now, if you haven't, let's say, if you studied something else or whatever, or you're passionate about changing a career or whatsoever, and we have plenty of these at Misk, where we have an offering through Misk Academy, which is basically how do we get you job ready for an in-demand job in the future economy. So it can be around the tech jobs or about product management, marketing jobs. And just to give you an idea, last year we upskilled about 5,000 young people. And basically the way we measure success there is what percentage of our graduates get either a new job or a promotion within a month, 3 months, all the way, let's say, up to 6 months. And we're hitting there for our immersive programs. About 80% of the graduates kind of get a job or a promotion. So that's kind of a super, let's say, powerful model. And it's a program of three months in general that gets you really job ready in these domains.
That's amazing, and I think also the fact that you're able to really measure that impact is so it's so wonderful. And I know, Chrisyle, as a recruiter, this might be something that's particularly exciting for you to know that there's so much ripe talent for the picking. I'd love to know if you have any reactions to kind of what Mohamed mentioned about the jobs of the future, if some of those are within Dell, and if you guys are also actively recruiting for emerging talent within those areas.
So yes, I think in terms of looking at the jobs of the future, there's a huge trend in terms of looking at new innovation in roles. I mean, a role that would have been done face to face as marketing is now gone digital. So there is a lot of new trends emerging in terms of new roles. There is a lot of talent as well. So I think from a technology perspective, for us, the future at least is cloud. There's a lot of buzz around cloud software. So we have individuals who are passionate about the cloud, and you can see this in terms of the readings and the workshops that they go through. So at this point in time, I think there's a lot of pivot towards I studied this, but now I'm going to go and do something completely different. I'll give you my own example. I studied biotechnology, and now I'm in recruitment, so in IT. So the world, I think now is endless, I would say, in terms of opportunity. It's not necessary that there is something that you study that you have to stick to, because there is a world of information and a world of mentorship that is available online, and that you can harness and also inculcate new inspiration and new passion for. So I think there are a lot of opportunities, and as an organization, that is something that we're looking to as well.
That's so awesome to hear, and I think that it's definitely something that we want to see more of, and understand what roles are opening up at companies that can help students then determine what skills they need. We have an amazing amount of questions from the audience, and I'd love to get to them. So I might switch gears a little bit from what we were talking about. But one question that came through says, a key learning for new graduates joining the workforce is learning implicit social cues in an office. How can we replicate, modify, or even enhance this in a remote environment setting? I think that's like kind of what it's that etiquette that maybe you miss out on when or a new set of etiquette that you should have when you join a job remotely through the onboarding process. So I'm curious, maybe Chrisyle or Stella, if you'd like to share your thoughts to that question.
I can share very quickly the first thing that came to mind. This is all about internal networking at the end of the day. We do hate this word, but that's exactly what it is. Stay curious. That would be my advice to people who ask this. How are you going to spend your first 100 days on the job, right? Allocate some time on your schedule meticulously and intentionally to meet every single person in your team. Have a virtual coffee chat. I heard of a company once that in the actual coffee room, in the actual coffee machine, they put a camera and they had people connecting virtually when they were going to grab a coffee. So establish that practice in your own routine. I'm not saying spend all of your time having coffee with colleagues, but I'm saying do it intentionally. Who is next to you? Who is above you? Who can be a partner? Learn about what they do. Ask them about advice that can be very useful as you are a new employee and as you build relationships with people in other locations. Be mindful of time zones. I think that's something that a lot of people tend to forget. For example, Friday is not a working day in the Middle East. If you are in the US, be mindful of the fact that you're not going to ask for an appointment or a meetup on a Friday. So spend time meeting people around you. Stay curious, ask questions, don't be afraid to go deeper into what the other person does and not only what you do, and start building those relationships gradually. That's how you get to understand more of the office dynamic when you are a virtual employee. And I hope one day that you can meet your team face to face as well, right?
It definitely helps. I know that something that we talk about at Cosmic Centaurs, which interesting came from Rajat, who posed this question, was that this idea of a hallway reputation. When you're in a physical space, you have that rapport. People know you for something. Either you're, the team member who brings like a treat on the last day of the week, or you're somebody who's the whiz at, working with some tech. So these hallway reputations that we no longer have in the virtual space look a little bit different.
Tala, let's not forget of the fact that you can still find a mentor, you can find a buddy, right? It doesn't matter if this is virtual or no, this is reality. You can always look for someone who's older in a company, who knows more about the ins and outs, have a coffee with them. And if you don't like the word mentorship, at least have that type of relationship that you are open to advice and curious to learn from that person. You can do that with Skype any time of the week. Yeah,
absolutely. And it's actually a great segue to another question that we had, which really addresses that. Mark asks that a huge part of the university experience is the connections you build with your peers, that you work together towards a common goal. So maybe, Stella, you can share some insight on what universities might be doing to promote and enable this peer-to-peer connections, especially as they move to be more virtual and online educational experiences.
Everyone. I really don't think there's a single university, guys, that's not going to be online. here. Yes, I do appreciate that, peer-to-peer connection in a real-time environment is the most important element of being at school. To give you an example, from INSEAD, we moved a lot of classroom experience into Zoom, and we do replicate the Amphi experience by using breakout rooms, sending students into smaller groups where they meet each other, talk about an exercise, reflection, and then come into the basic classroom. This is not crazy innovation. Okay, this is what a lot of other universities are doing out there. But this is a simple example of how you can replicate the environment in a classroom. We recently, and that was quite a fun webinar, we recently held a webinar on career transitions, and we had music playing throughout the self-reflection exercises. And a lot of people were saying, oh, this is different, the vibe is different. I've never been in a classroom where, I can listen to music when I do my exercises. So, cut a long story short, this is part of our new way of delivering online learning. I think what people need to be more concerned about is, yes, definitely the peer-to-peer experience is going to be there, but the quality of academics, the quality of education you get is extremely important. Who is your professor? Who is your classmate? Are you learning from this class? What is your out-of-class experience? How do you connect with people? How do you reflect on that? I think it's extremely important, Tala.
Absolutely. It's super important. And as this online education experience becomes even more and more prevalent, Rama asks, many employers aren't acknowledging online degrees. Do you think that's changing in the Middle East? Chrisyle, Mohamed, maybe one of you guys want to take that question. Chrisyle?
Yes.
Oh, yes, there we go.
Okay, so I think yes. Going a little, or not opposing, but going a little away from Mohamed's traditionalistic view, I think that yes, of course, having a university degree is important, but it doesn't have to be a 4-year degree. It doesn't. Right. It no longer has to be a bachelor's degree where you've done it for 4 years and you've been within the university. I think online degrees also are important because in the end, at this point, everything is moving online in terms of online education. And there's a wealth of experience that's available online. Like I said, I mean, at this point in time, I saw that, from Yale to Harvard, they were, giving out courses for free. So having an online experience and even an online degree is something that is well accepted because it shows that you are curious, you are interested to study, to learn. And, it doesn't limit to it only a 4-year bachelor's degree or a master's degree that you have to have.
Yeah. If I may add to that, I think I think thanks to this, let's say, COVID situation, is that it's been a huge social experiment where more than 1 billion people have been learning remotely in the higher let's say education space, probably alone, and in the absence of having, let's say, a live or in-person classes. I think the two things that have changed, one is that new habits and patterns have been formed with the students, but the other one, which is the necessity of regulators to come along and adjust to the new reality, which means accrediting online degrees. So I think now, here in the Middle East, I think in most of the countries, online degrees are now accredited. So that's great news.
That is great news, actually. And there was a question that came from Mark because he kind of touched on the subject, this idea that, what are the policies that are in place that are, if any, helping to support this? And more specifically, I think it would be interesting as our last question to kind of talk about how much of the burden of reskilling workers and offering these educational opportunities should fall on companies versus governments.
I think it's kind of, given what's happening right now, it's the burden of government or it's the burden of employers. I think it's a collective responsibility. Governments have a role to play in there, universities have a role to play there, and companies have a very big important role to play. And I think, and individuals have an important role to play. So there needs to be a collective responsibility in order to address this successfully.
I agree. And I think, like you said, the responsibility is shared. And in this social experiment, we're all trying to figure out kind of where do we fit, who takes on what, what are the skills that maybe we thought we needed for the remote workplace that we don't, and versus what are the skills we never, thought we needed, or the, trends that are emerging that we didn't see coming. I'd like to thank you all for answering all the questions. And I just have one more. It's something that we're doing across panels with all of our speakers, and that is to complete the following sentence. The future of work is, you can either add a word or two, 3 or 4, there's no real rules. So Chrisyle, maybe we'll start with you. The future of work is?
Okay, so I'll add 2 words. The
Great,
future of work is ever changing, or in other words, ever evolving. I think that that's something that we've learned from this entire situation. Let alone if you had asked anyone in 2015, what does 5 years from now look like? No one would have said, I'll be working from home along with the entire globe. So I think the future of work is ever evolving and ever changing. And the most important thing is to keep up with this ever evolving trend and to learn, continuous learning, have a growth mindset, and have the affinity to learn all the time, so you'll be able to keep up with this ever-changing future of work.
Absolutely. Stella, I saw you nodding along. What is your word to complete the sentence? The future of work is?
First of all, I agree totally with Chrisyle. That was wonderful. Well, for me, the future of work is now. And it's all about digitization. If I want to add something to what you said. So openness to change, continuous questioning of the way we work are the keys to being prepared for the future of work.
Absolutely. Yeah, really, that sits well with me. Mohamed, and for you, the future of work is?
The future of work is you, I would say. you are the architect of your own future. So I would say don't be passive, really take initiative, find the opportunity, create the opportunity, and use as well collectively. You're in this kind of collectively, kind of work together, learn from each other, support each other. So yeah, that's what I would say.
I love that. And that ties really well into this whole idea of this entrepreneurial experience where everybody kind of on that one team sharing to create progress, create growth. I'd like to thank you all so much for joining us today and for taking time. I know you're busy and your insights were super valuable. They've definitely left us with a lot to think about. We learned about everything from the fact that remote work offers have doubled in May compared to Jan 2020. We discussed about the jobs of the future, ed tech, deep tech, fintech, and the ones that you can't ignore. Thanks to you, Mohamed, for sharing that. We know that, Chrisyle, you touched on this, the workforce is becoming incredibly resilient. And although it might be one of those buzzwords, it's something that we've actually seen across panels all day today. It's a word that's reappeared. And so it's definitely give us something to think about. So once again, thank you guys so much for being with us. I'd also like to thank everybody watching, our attendees who are tuning in and engaging throughout the session. For anybody who missed it, or if you'd like to share with somebody who you think might find this interesting, which is pretty much everybody, because there was a lot to unpack. We will be reposting the video on our website and our social pages. Just a reminder that you can enter our competition. We, as in all conference fashion, have a giveaway. We are offering 5 companies the chance to win a free consultation with us. On the conference page on our website, you can apply there. And finally, that is it for day 1. I'm so grateful to everybody who made it, and for our remarkable panelists, thank you. Tomorrow we kick off at 11 a.m. with a fun session about workspaces of the future. So it's a great way to transition from today's discussion about jobs, skills, and talent of the future. So thank you all so much, and I hope that I'll see you guys tomorrow.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure.
Thank you. It was really nice being with you today. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Stella. Thank you.
For being with you guys. Thank you.
Thanks, Mohamed. Take care, everyone.